Welcome back to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent based in Kiev, Ukraine. You can find his video blog over on YouTube. His name is spelled Philipittner, 6 letters in each name. Philip Ittner is also his Twitter handle. Phil, welcome back to the program, and thanks so much for joining us every week. I really appreciate these updates. I understand.
No, my pleasure, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand President Zelensky just met with either President Xi or a representative thereof. Can you tell me about that?
Well, they had about an hour-long phone call yesterday, apparently, and they discussed a wide range of topics. But most notably was this Chinese proposal for a peace deal, some sort of peace deal. Now, Ukrainians have been reluctant to entertain the Chinese plan because it's kind of vague, and it's just this really broad framework, and it talks most importantly about territorial integrity. And what the Ukrainians are concerned about is, well, what is territorial integrity? Is it territory that is held currently, like right now, today? Because by our consideration, Russia has stolen a lot of our territory, and we want it back.
Right.
Or so is now the time why Moscow and Beijing are kind of like looking at a potential ceasefire, because they know there's a coming to-offensive, and they're probably holding about as much territory as they're gonna hold as of today. So if they can negotiate a peace, for where Russian soldiers are at this moment, then that's a win for Moscow, and might be what's motivating Beijing. Kiev has other plans. Right. Kiev intends to grab back as much territory as they can, and then we can talk about territorial integrity. Absolutely, once Ukraine has Crimea and the Donbass and all the rest of it back to 91 borders.
Yeah, I notice you say Kiev, which is how I always pronounced it, and yet I hear on television constantly people pronouncing it as Kiev. What's
yeah.
Is it just generational differences here?
No. It's a tricky thing, and it's hard for the English ear to wrap itself around. But I'll give you a little quick primer. So basically, lots of people have indeed adopted the single syllable Kiev, but I have, in the 22 years that I've been coming here, it had always been spoken to me as a two-syllable word. But the problem is, where do you put the Y? Do you put the Y at the end of the first syllable or the beginning of the second? Many Ukrainians take exception at that and say that Kiev, so if you hear that Kiev, that's Russian. But if you hear Kiev, that's Ukrainian.
Oh, interesting. So it's it's sort of like
err on the side of caution. Go with Kiev. Yeah. I've long since stopped fighting about this, because it's Slavic languages, Ukrainian or Russian. They're very, very difficult languages, and a lot of them can, even that little inflection, as I just saw you, as Kiev as opposed to Kiev. I mean, you might in a conversation not even notice a difference. Right, but a Ukrainian or a Russian will.
Yeah, actually, you're making a political statement based on
and you don't even know
difference.
It's a mind. It's a proverbial and a real minefield out here.
Exactly.
So I try to stay it safe, but I just, to my ear, because I've been coming here so long, I still go with the dual syllable thing. Yeah. But
I understand that there
is perfectly acceptable.
Okay, I understand that there is an app called Alpine Quest Explorer, which is being used by the Russians over the objection of the app developer. They say it's a recreational app. They're very unhappy about this. In fact, they're complaining that bootlegged versions of it are being used by the Russians. And in fact, this is their, they put out a notice saying it's come to our attention that our flagship application, Alpine Quest Explorer, is being used in the ongoing Ukraine-Russian war. And basically what's happening is that the Russians are using this app to identify Ukrainian soldiers' positions and troop movements. And I don't know much about the app. I'm assuming it's probably tied into, satellite photos or something. I don't know. But there's this whole thing about the app wars. Do you know anything about this, Phil?
Yeah. This has been so look, these things have become so ubiquitous and so important to our daily lives, but they are, in order to get us a proper signal, in order to communicate properly, oftentimes you need to be geolocated. Now, for a soldier in the field, that is incredibly dangerous. And a lot of the apps that have been developed actually during this war, a lot of them are about hiding your location and protecting your communications. Apps like Telegram or Signal are widely used here. People want to use WhatsApp, things like that, because it hides your communications. And it's the age-old thing, Tom, with warfare, I'm afraid. If you find a way to use an offensive capability, well, somebody's going to start using, looking into ways to use a defensive capability. So things like this Alpine app, your average Ukrainian soldier may or may not realize that he's giving away his position when he gets in. It's like criticisms we've heard of TikTok. Is there a part of the application that is being manipulated and utilizing geolocation and all the rest of it, or revealing conversations that maybe the user isn't even aware of? And a lot of this war is actually going on the phone system, because this is so important now. This is also used to control drones. This is, you can get open source intel off of this thing. It's the technology to compromise your position or your information is constantly at odds with how useful these things are, because you can also do things like warn of air raid attacks precisely, almost. You can do things like set up the communications for, if your city is attacked, you can check to see that people are safe and sound. This is a really useful device, but it can also be used to compromise things and used for your enemy's benefit. And it's a fascinating development. Like so much in this war, this will be studied for years to come, and it will be another phase of development.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. The last time we talked last week, you were talking about how it's mud season in Ukraine, and having lived in both Vermont and New Hampshire, I know mud season. I mean, there were periods of time. We lived on the backside of a lake in New Hampshire on at the end of a 1.5 mile long dirt road, and there were literally 2-3 week periods where we couldn't get in and out. We had to stockpile food and wood and stuff for heat. So what's the status now? We keep hearing about a spring offensive, both a possible Ukrainian offensive and a possible Russian offensive. What do you know about these?
Well, in terms of the weather, I mean, we had a brief period about a week ago where we had lovely summer-like weather, where we were kind of all hoping that the April showers were giving way to the May flowers. It has turned, however, and we're back to kind of overcast, if not raining, then threatening to rain. And you're absolutely 100%. I can't speak to Vermont, but I can speak to Ukraine and Russia. And there is an entire period where a lot of this land is just, it's unpassable. You're mired in mud. I know lots of Ukrainian soldiers have been asking less and less for, a new stove or something that they can position in their dugout. I hear a lot of talk about we need shovels and we need wood to shore up our defensive lines.
Right.
To my knowledge, they're getting it. I haven't been on the lines except when I was out in Zaporizhzhia. That wasn't right on the trenches. But this mud issue is a huge issue. We've seen Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, warning that he thinks that the last heavy rains will be sometime in the first part of May. It'll take about a week, in his estimation, for the ground to solidify enough that an offensive can begin. Of course, Prigozhin might be saying that because he's trying to pressure the Kremlin and the Russian Ministry of Defense to support his troops that he has out in Bakhmut. But I do not think that this ground is going to be ready, and this is my estimation. And I am not a military expert, nor am I out in the field right now. But I would bet you that we're more looking mid to late May at the earliest for an offensive, because they don't. One of the biggest fears here, Tom, is that they want to get it right the first time. If they launch an offensive, the Ukrainians, and they botch it, that will be worse. Than getting incremental, doing it or getting kind of incremental advantages, because they do know that it's essential that the Western world, who's been sending so much equipment here, we heard Stoltenberg say it's all here now, there must be a success.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, and when we lived in Vermont and New Hampshire, I mean, mud season typically resolved in early May, so we'll see. Phil Ittner. Phil, thanks so much.
And you were driving tanks.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you,
Thanks
Tom.
a lot, Phil. Good talking to you. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Is U.S. growth cooling? Is a recession coming? What does the Fed have in store for us?